Hello and welcome. Hi, I'm author Grace Wroldson. I'm a mother, survivor, author, strategy partners for moms. If you are forced to co-parent with a narcissist or stuck in a high conflict custody battle, you will know that the family courts often fail us protective moms. So I aim to be in a light in the darkness of this dilemma. And I have a special guest today who is also a survivor, also an author, and she is a parent coach and she's got a lot of training and background. So I can't wait to get into some of her work. Just know if you're going through family court, it's failing you and your children, you are not alone. So sometimes the judge becomes the second abuser or there's corrupt court professionals. So welcome, Kellyanne. Are you there?
Yes, thank you so much, Grace, for having me here today.
So glad to have you. We'll introduce our work and how we help support moms, but we have a lot of questions like, why do things go so wrong for protective moms in family court? And where is a mom's power to protect her children? What about these courts, these judges, professionals? So we have seen a lot of family court failures. I say the family court was successful in some ways and failed us in other ways. So I don't like to throw out the use of family court and accessing our courts using our constitutional rights. But as we all know, and if you've read my books, the family court can be a new stage for abuse and violence against moms and women. So Kellyanne Peterson, who's an author who's been through some of this herself, has been in courts as an advocate and partner with mom. And I endured a 5-day trial. So I endured 12 years of family court litigation and a 5-day trial that spanned 2 years. And so we are survivors and we know that the family courts sometimes get it wrong. So my mission is to help motivated mothers get peace and protection for themselves and their children. You can come to my website. My background is loving an alcoholic and leaving, using the Al-Anon program and CODA recovery programs, therapy, a DV counselor, everything, you name it. I wanted to extract myself out of that toxic relationship and get healthy and sane. My first book for moms is Co-Parenting with a Narcissist, 7 Rules to Stay Sane. And I say, if you're ready and willing to learn, I am here to teach. Kellyanne is also a teacher. I have 4 books for moms that are all on Amazon. I say read them in order because they are not just my story. They're the tips, there's the strategies, there's the tools, because you don't have to make the same mistakes that I made. You don't have to step in the same traps that I stepped in. You can learn ahead of time what to watch out for. Like one of the things we'll talk about today is watching out for false parental alienation claims that often help the narcissist win in family court. Just a quick disclaimer, this is to raise awareness, to be able to tell the truth. I write and speak in a pen name. I here to share our knowledge and survivor wisdom and point to some resources, give you encouragement, and offer you some hope. It's not a one size fits all. There's no legal advice in here. The only advice I give is to get legal advice. All custody cases vary, and some of the things we say, it might not be applicable to your case. You can pause this and read. But what do? We work on sanity, stability, being smart, getting strength and support, getting skills. You might need some life skills to navigate the narcissist, and most importantly, making a strategy. So my newest book is called Tame the Narcissist. It's 10 keys for better co-parenting to create peace and protection using strategy and skillful means. I say get a strategy partner. I had 3 coaches. I had an Al-Anon sponsor, a DV counselor, a CODA sponsor. I had women from the program that were on my team of 10. And then I hired the experts in narcissism, and I got 2 coaches, 3 coaches, and then a parenting coach. And Kellyanne was one of my team of support going through it. And it was very stressful. And, the stress can be very overwhelming. So this new book has my 20 wants list and all my best, newest work about using skillful means. So pick up that new book and get started underlining, highlighting, reflecting on your case. So, as survivors of a narcissist or an abuser or an alcoholic, how do we save our vulnerable children after we leave the abusive partner? And I always say abusers abuse. So, um, I will give you a couple tips in today's little podcast or video. You remember to like and subscribe if you're listening, and we'll talk about DV issues, which Kellyanne Peterson is also I would consider an expert in this by now. She's got a lot of experience. So welcome, Kellyanne. Are you there?
Yes, yes, I'm here. And I'm always amazed at how many resources you have. Like you really are a wealth of resources for anybody going through this. Um, I have a different set of resources. Mine are experiential. So I went through a domestic violence relationship myself and got out of that, went through years of counseling, also used Al-Anon. Back in those days, codependency was kind of new. I'm a little bit older, um, but and then I started working in social services. I was contracted through social services to do family intervention specialist, which meant parents dealing with domestic violence coming out of jail, um, and just trying to help lots of parents deal with. I have 50% custody with this person who is a narcissist, a domestic violence, a drug addict. I mean, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a complicated road. It's a complicated road for sure, which
Yeah,
is,
and
mhm.
And what we've learned in family court, or what I have learned, is that family courts are not about child abuse prevention. They're not about child neglect prevention. They will deal with some of it after the fact, but it has to rise to a level that is like serious and you have evidence. So the family courts are not really in child protection. They're really in giving parents rights. And that's what I've learned. So, like, we have these vulnerable children, and we just left this narcissistic abuser, and we don't want our children to be narcissistically abused. And so, we fight really hard in family court, or some of us just can't fight because we don't have the money or the emotional strength. So, sometimes the children have to go through all that abuse and come out as survivors themselves and do the healing work. So I know as a survivor, I had to recognize that this was a DV case, and I didn't really understand how this was a DV case because most of my abuse happened outside of the relationship. And that's when he used the flying monkeys, the minions, weaponizing my child and professionals against me, triangulation tactics, and legal abuse. So I got most of it out of the relationship because I said no to a narcissist, and I put up these strong boundaries to safeguard my mind, my body, my spirit, because he was so toxic to me. I was so triggered by anything he did or didn't do. I was always in a state of trigger, and so that's why I had to heal and I had to get support. So, how do we save our children? So many of us are on the front lines of family court battling it out. And just an update in my case, I lost in 2020 all my legal rights. I maintained 50% physical custody because I was not accused of parental alienation. So if you can avoid being accused of parental alienation or false PA claims, make sure you do that. I learned to safeguard and document and do different things so that couldn't be used in my case. But let's jump into a little bit about Kellyanne because she has a unique story. She was a teen mom and adoptive mom. She was a foster care. She's got a ton of experience and a bachelor's in marriage and family therapy. And she worked with many moms and had to go to court. And she saw firsthand that these abusers were getting their rights. And then judges were saying, yeah, you've got to now co parent with your abuser, which, if you talk to anybody in a DV counseling agency that's been there 5, 10 years, they'll say that doesn't work and that's not recommended. And I wish this was just across the board, that we understand you can't put an abused victim with their abuser and say, okay, now you've got to just get along and co-parent. So the abuser will continue to usually abuse their victims. So currently, she's a parent and life coach. She has her own ministry, and you can look for her book, which we'll talk about. Do you want to bring up any instances of how you helped moms in family court with DV cases?
You know, I created a parenting course. You kind of see there a link there for online parenting course. I created that parenting course by walking alongside my clients and seeing what they needed. So you're talking about how to deal with a lot of the court side. What I'm looking at now, where I shifted my focus, is I have no control over the courts. I have no control over the abuser. But if you call me and you do parenting classes with me, I do individual parenting classes because I like to go deep and it's kind of a half parenting class and half coaching at the same time. But I do that because every child, and this is part of my story, I had to co parent with a violent alcoholic um, until he passed away. And that caused a lot of issues. And I was so, I'm trying to get a drunk driver from behind the wheel. I'm trying to not have him drink with when he's with the kids. You know, it just was a mess. And I was afraid that, he was going to start hitting them since he stopped hitting me. Who was he going to hit when he got drunk? Um, it was horrible, and I did not have the skills and the training back then, and that was some of my motivation for the experiences you see here. But that's what I do now is I go, okay, there's two parents in this scenario, and the one who's fighting to keep their child safe, that whole thing is very complicated. But what I can do is what I did with the clients that I worked with for those many years and still am working with, is help the mom be the best, absolute best parent they can be. But not only that, because I'm also trained in art therapy and some other emotional healing techniques, you can I teach all that stuff in my parenting curriculum so that your kids aren't just being traumatized, and hopefully they get into therapy someday and get better. You can actually kind of heal as you go. So the kids show up, they've had a bad weekend or a bad time with their abusive parent. You can actually help them process those emotions and that trauma so that it's not life threatening or life damaging forever. So let me tell you a story. This mom that I worked with, her ex used the children wrote with permanent marker on the wall. They were younger kids, or not on the wall, on their arm. So the dad went and got magic eraser and scrubbed the permanent marker off of the child's arm. Well, it was burning. He came home with a massive blister type burn that went all the way from his wrist to his elbow. Um, and things like that happened frequently. The father was very extreme in his punishments. And so the children became more and more angry, more and more angry. The mom was just overwhelmed because he had a great relationship with the guardian ad litem, and he was able to just get away with all this awful behavior. So, anyways, what happened is we went over and I taught how to help your child because on her thing, when he walked in the door, now the boy's acting violent and angry and won't do anything and he's sulking. And, anger in children a lot of times is a sign of depression, frustration. I mean, they just came from an abusive environment. We need them to have these emotions so we can know what's going on. But I went through this whole little process with them where we taught them how to go from heightened emotions, deal with what's in the background, using a little bit of neuropsychology for those of you who are looking for the big words there, and being able to bring the child back down to a calm place, but not just because they denied what was happening. We're not stuffing these emotions, we're actually processing these emotions. And so, as a therapist, this is some of the stuff I did with my clients. But I thought, you know what, that's kind of like narrow and it's focused, because what happens when the client walks out the door, right? And my daughter, when she was dealing with the abuse from my late husband, she was having this stuff show up at 11 o'clock at night and nightmares, or later behaviors. It wasn't in the 9 to 5 window with your counselor. And so I started finding a way to communicate it with my parents that called me, and we did work. And I'm telling you, we really did have, I had a set of twins who were in a super, super abusive situation with the stepdad, who just made the mom, gaslighted the mom all the time and just made her crazy. And we started working with the twins. Well, the one boy wasn't interested in just talking about feelings in general, and he attached to the dad and became kind of more of a domestic violence abuser himself. But the daughter twin, she wanted help, and you know what, she grew up to be an amazing person. Um, and her brother unfortunately wound up becoming a drug addict eventually from dealing with all this stuff and not processing it. But the daughter actually wound up graduating high school. She was the first one in the family to graduate with high school. She went on to college, and she really is a peaceful person. Like, she dealt with her trauma as she went through it instead of stuffing it for years and trying to deal with it later.
You bring
So,
up a really good point. These moms, which I always say, please get your child a therapist. And no, the narcissist isn't going to agree. Sometimes you have to have the judge order it, or the GAL or the parent coach push for it, or somebody push for it. But the heal as you go method, I really like that, instead of wait till you're totally out to heal. And I always teach the moms, the healing has to start with us. And part of getting healing is getting help. I'm not sure what the if it's a trust issue or why moms are not seeking this team of support that I talk about getting in the first book, because that's those support people that, the key I always say is our sanity. And when you're dealing with an abuser or a personality disordered narcissist, they will use a tactic called crazy making. They will not only accuse you of being crazy, but they will systematically drive you crazy with different tactics. And I say they've got a lot of tricks and traps and tactics, but we need skills and tools and strategies. And I teach moms, like, start your healing process, get your self support. And then this is, where you come in, supporting a parent who has to watch their child be traumatized and abused, or get a child back that's traumatized and abused. But a lot of moms are not getting themselves the support team that they need. And I think that's what we should talk about, is in this, about the support and why it matters. Let me just talk about your book real quick, because it is available on Amazon. If people want to learn your story or hear a detail about your journey from abuse to victory, I've read this book all the way through, and I did cry. I'll just let you know. And I'm going to read this little excerpt. Wounded Heart, Graceful Warrior is an amazing journey of redemption. And Kellyanne is a teen mom who marries young only to be rejected and abused by her alcoholic husband. But Yeshua, Jesus, has not forgotten her heart towards him, bringing divine interventions and miraculous emotional healings. Kellyanne goes from a wounded, abused, and broken woman to a beautiful, beloved bride of Yeshua, the Messiah. Her story reaches deep into the hearts of women and men alike who have struggled with abuse and addictions. It reveals a loving, forgiving, and kind relationship between Yeshua and his beloved bride. Kellyanne will have you laughing, crying, and calling out as you read this powerful story of redemption and healing. So, do you feel like writing your story? I know I've written, I don't know how many books by now, my story, but writing has been very healing for us. And I think this impacts our children. How do you feel about the writing journey? Do I have you here, Kellyanne? Are you still there?
sorry. Oh, I'm back. I had it on mute for a second. Writing this
Yes.
book for me was 30 years after the event. So when I wrote this, um, there was a lot of wisdom behind the stories I told and why I told them and the purpose of them. And even here on your slide, you have this excerpt about um, just this mental concept that I had. Um, and I wrote this specific part of the book because when I worked with domestic violence shelters, I worked with a lot of these family coming out of social services or in social services. um, I just saw this same mindset again and again and again and again, you know. And yeah, so I wrote this. It did have even some healing places where I thought, oh, I didn't know that was still, that was still in there. Um, but it was freeing. It was freeing to write this. You'll see in some of my writing, I have Jesus or I have Yeshua. Yeshua is just the Hebrew name for Jesus. So when I work with Spanish clients, I don't call them their American name. I call them their Spanish name and do the pronunciation the best I can because I just think that's respectful. But that applies also to the scripture for me. If his name was in Hebrew, then I want to use his Hebrew name. But yeah, I mean, this was fun. Can I read this little excerpt?
Well, we're gonna switch into anyone watching or on the slides can pause this, but I think we're gonna switch into giving some keys because not all of my listeners and watchers do take a spiritual approach to their healing, but many of us have different modalities, different religions, different cultures. And I always say take what's helpful and leave the rest. And there's many names for God, and so I'm going to have them pause and read this, and let's go into giving some practical, logical, common sense um, guidance, because I know you used God to lean on and to guide you, and not all the moms in my groups. I mean, there are some hardcore Christians that are out there pushing the Jesus movement that really turns off a lot of my moms who are very struggling and they feel like God has abandoned them. But I know that in your book you felt that way, and things really changed. So I wanted to introduce your book, let them know there's something out there that can be validating, and that God did carry you through to the other side. And there's lots of miracles in your story. I can't wait for it to become a movie because it's very powerful. There's some, obviously some trigger warnings. There's some DV scenes in there, but there really is some spiritual healing and carrying you through to the other side. So can we jump into some things, because I want to keep this short, about what we have to watch out for, and what moms can take away from this quick session, video session or podcast session. And I already talked about safeguarding our cases against parental alienation claims. And we've already given a warning that family court is not really a justice system, it's more a legal system. And it's sometimes the abuser's next weapon, the next stage of abuse. And for those of you who are co-parenting with a narcissist and you feel like you're having co-parenting abuse, it is called post-separation abuse, and it can be a channel for hostility towards a mother. And Kellyanne and I are both survivors of this. They can go on hate campaigns, and family court can be a place to hide, lie, cheat, get away with things, and steal children as hostages. And Kellyanne and I know the different names of all the tactics, but you can get the smear campaigns and the false accusations, flying monkeys, minions, poisoning the well, tactics, and much, much more. So it's just a warning that family court has all of this happening. And if you're mindful of it and you know about it, there's ways to safeguard and stop. So let's talk about one key, and that is something like the Al Anon program teaches to get to serenity, knowing what you can change and what you can't, but getting to sanity. So when we have our sanity through the insanity, we have something stable to stand on. But what I always say is a narcissist will emotionally destabilize a target. And when we're emotionally destabilized, we do things that can hurt our custody case, or we aren't effective as mothers to our children. So, one of the keys is to get courage through connection. And so I push and encourage and plead with moms to get support. And I know you had support going through it, but the courage comes through connecting, which is why reading Kellyanne's story of overcoming.
For those of you listening, it looks like something went.
Can you
There
still
she
hear me?
Yeah, you're back. Here you go.
All right, let's make sure our meeting is being recorded. Hold on a second. Yes. So, sorry for the interruption, but we're talking about the keys now, things that we can do to help our custody case or co parenting with an abusive ex. And another key I want to bring in is when we're supported, we're stronger. So, you know, having a coach or a lawyer for a custody battle is one thing. Having a therapist for the big emotions or a DV counselor, having a parent coach, having a team is what I talk about in the first book. Do you want to say anything to the different supports that we need going through this? I know many moms are ashamed. They don't reach out. They don't tell anybody about what's going on. They get more and more isolated, which makes them an easier target and weaker. Do you want to say anything about the sanity and the courage they need and the emotional support to stay strong?
Yeah, one of the things that I have developed over the years with the parents that I work with is two ways to deal with this because sometimes you're just too afraid to tell anybody, you can't get the words out, they're stuck, right? They're just stuck inside of you. And so there's a neurological repatterning that I do that's through physical exercise, but it's very specific. It's not yoga or anything like that. It's intentionally built on neuropsychology. And then the other one, which a lot of people forget to mention nowadays, is expression through art or journaling. And so sometimes that sanity comes back to me connecting with myself, right? Because you've had so much crazy making. And I remember in one of my early therapy sessions, even back then, they just gave me a piece of paper and had a bunch of markers there and said, when I say your ex's name, don't put words, just tell me how you feel on this paper, express it on this paper. And I like black marker scribbling, all these things. And it was funny that helped release. And you can do some of these things by yourself. And then once you can come back to yourself, getting emotional support for me was a lot easier because I was so locked up internally from all what you guys are calling gaslighting. I would call it verbal abuse, emotional abuse. That I didn't even know if I could trust my own thoughts. And just getting that stuff out helps with the sanity and allows you to get emotional support from others. And I know Grace listed a bunch of different supports that she uses. There are free supports out there, and then some are paid. But this has to start in you sometimes. And sometimes, I would just be so upset. I would go out and just for my own personal sanity, right? I don't have anyone to talk to. I don't know where to go yet. I didn't know about domestic violence counseling back then until after, 7 or 8 months out of the relationship. And I would just go running or jogging or swimming or something to just get the physical tension out of my body so I could start thinking again. Um, and those are my keys for sanity is try to get your body to just come back down a little bit. And the other thing that I did, and I know this is on the crazy side, I accept that, but I watched comedy. Not comedy that insulted other people, but comedy that's truly funny. and I would just laugh my head off. I one of my favorite movies was The Three Amigos because I think it's hilarious that they accidentally kill the invisible swordsman. And I just little things like that. Um, that humor actually causes your brain to rest. It actually brings the healing chemicals in your brain that you need so that you can go from crazy back down to calm. Because in this state of gaslighting, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, your mind is so stressed. The chemicals in your brain are so overproducing that it's almost impossible to come back down and think clearly. And
Yeah. Yeah, just want to jump in. That is a great tip for them to move their body. And I know I took a walk and it was for me to burn off stress. I mean, if you're fighting in family court or co-parenting with your abuser, it's going to be highly stressful and you're in fight and flight mode. A lot of moms get autoimmune conditions, moms that are really under attack. I've seen them get cancers. It's a very toxic environment, which is why I teach Skillful-Means to stop being the target of blame, to try to stop pushing against the abuser, but to neutralize the all the interactions and do our healing work. So yeah, healing through journaling and writing, healing through getting therapists and support, getting out there and exercising. Really, moms need a full self-care plan if they're going through this. So thank you for some of those ideas. I know we had this slide here about how the domestic violence has correlations in the family court. If you're a mom in family court with your abuser, the system might fail you, and you might have to figure out how you can use the system to help you. And so you might have to lower your expectations and get some strategy partners. And while Kellyanne helps you with these children who helps you parent the children who are being abused now because they have unsupervised visits with your ex abuser, there are people that can help you, like lawyers and other people, help you strategize to use family court as much as it can help you. So I talk about my legal strategies is backing up into the microscope of the family court can sometimes stop the abuser from abusing the child. I have like 20 different strategies, and we had to use many different strategies before I came to the using Skillful-Means, which came from the what's it called, nonviolent communication groups and meetings. So find the tools, find the resources. And Kellyanne and I wanted to come on and let you know that you are not alone in this. If you're dealing with post separation abuse or having forced to co parent with your narcissistic ex, you're not alone. This happens, and some of us have to ask for guidance and hear other stories of overcoming these odds and how other mothers got out of these situations and raised these kids and went on to heal. So, Kellyanne's someone who went on to heal and then able to help others. And I really think there can be some purpose in our pain if you're a DV survivor, and your children were able to safely be raised and get healing themselves. There can be some purpose in the pain. And I think you found that after you went through your situation, that you were really now able to help others, and it gave you like meaning and purpose and motivation, and it also helps with the healing process. Am I right there, Kellyanne?
you know, working with my clients caused a lot of emotional triggers for me, and I would go and use these tools that I'm talking about in my parenting stuff to heal myself and then go back into the situation and help that client. Because yeah, you've got to stop, work on yourself, and then help others. And the blessing I had really more than anything was being able to walk with other women through this journey and know that my story was my story. Your story is your story. And I have the ability to listen and we talk together about how to bring healing into your family that fits you, not me, fits you. And I've had enough experience in that to do that. And yeah, it's a blessing. It's a blessing. It's a blessing. It's a blessing. And I see on this next slide, this is the only legal advice I ever tell any of my clients is number one, document, 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 document. Everything
Yeah,
else you're going to talk to Grace about or your
yeah.
attorney.
Yes, and I teach moms to document strategically because moms who end up documenting everything get overwhelmed and they feel like they're just focused on the narcissist abuser, which just means you're highly triggered and always on edge and always focused on what he's doing or not doing. That's toxic. So we get the top 10, narrow it down to 5, talk with the lawyer, and then we document what is important to their case that could possibly be used as leverage or a defense. So I teach moms to document defensively and offensively, and to in other situations just log things. So yeah, moms are like, well, how do I deal with the abuser in this custody battle and in the separation that I? So yes, documentation is going to be key, and then getting support from other professionals, making allies, getting mentors, getting coaches. Because sometimes if you can't report everything the narcissist is doing to a child that can go against you, it did in my case. Every CPS, Child Protective Services report, they said it was me, even if they were anonymous, which pointed to me as maybe unstable and trying to get revenge against my ex, which wasn't true. And I think what's really good is if you have a partner, a strategy partner like me or Kelly Ann, you can really be strategic in your conversations with the teachers and doctors so that you don't look like a completely unraveled, abused mom. You can actually know what to say. Like we often practice, what is the short summary of what you're going to say, and then stop, because going into long details, long messages to doctors, it all gets the drama. It's the drama, trauma, and chaos that the narcissist kicks up that then ropes a mom into looking like the destabilized parent. And so we need to be stable and sane, and they always say pick your battles. And so it's, some the children, we're not going to be able to protect their children from everything. One, I don't know if it was you or somebody said children get run over in their driveway accidentally. So like, as much as I want to be there for everything to protect my child, it's just not reasonable. That our child is going to need coping strategies, survival strategies, and they also need at least one sane, healthy parent. And a parent who is supported, like with a coach, uh, is stronger and more sane and can be logical and reasonable and not jump off any emotional ledges. And a parent who's actually working with me or someone that strategizes is stronger. So just know that if you get support for what you're going through, if your child is really struggling, you might want to get a coach like me or Kelly Ann in your corner. And we have another couple tips we want to leave you with. It's, you know, when you're stressed out and unsupported, you can become impatient and also be hurting your children. So this is why I say to moms, get the support, um, to be that loving, patient, compassionate mom. Because I believe the compassion really does heal. And you have this slide here. Do you want to talk about number 2?
Yeah, seek your own professional counseling. And it kind of goes back to what you were saying on the slide before, where it talks about, don't be the woman who cries wolf. Um, this is this is super important. I've had counselors that I've worked with over the years, because sometimes you just need an outside voice that's, you know, not in the middle of everything. So you talk to your mom, your sister, your friend, they're in the midst of that with you. And sometimes they can't see this bigger picture. Um, and one of the biggest things that, like I was saying earlier, wanted to go for a walk, do something, because when you are emotionally peaceful, then You don't look like the mom who cries wolf. When you get the power back into your hands by saying, okay, my child came in upset, traumatized, I can help my child learn the skills they need to do these things, to deal with this difficult life that they're in. And it is awful. So we're not ignoring that. We're just saying that's the truth. So let's learn how to live with awful um, in a healthy way, healthy as you can. It makes a huge difference. You don't feel like, if I don't cry wolf about everything. And professional counselors, people like Grace with Resources, these guys help. And if you're in domestic violence counselors specialize in those things. Um, you know, I I was just looking through a counseling list the other day and just to see who was out in the area. And they even have ones that specialize in narcissism now. So, I mean, get somebody that supports you that's outside of the system, who only knows your side of the story, and who can speak truth into your life.
Yeah, it's very validating. And I used two domestic violence counselors, one for 6 years. And what I didn't know is if you do get a domestic violence counselor, they can provide a letter of service, and the lawyer can use that in the court. And so knowing what there's also another resource that I have for domestic violence victims, because you can have an advocate for if you've been traumatized, you can have an advocate show up to your court sessions and hold the judges accountable, because you are, a traumatized victim, and these are invisible wounds. So there's things that DV survivors can do if they go and get the help. So I've had moms say, okay, I'll go to a DV counselor. They go once. They go once to get that letter, and it's not the same as going for 6 years the way I went, where I had to unpack how did I become such a target? What about me was making me a target to abusive people that take advantage of me? And there were so many things I had to clean up. The DV agency I worked with even had a money school. And I went through that money school. They provided free childcare and dinner. And we learned about credit scores and taking ownership of finances, because I teach moms not to be reliant on the abuser for money, because that puts the power in their hands. So that means we also have to reach out and get more help. So I think we'll stop there, because we're really drilling home the message of getting support for this difficult journey, and that as we get support, we can help our children through this. So I just want to say Kellyanne's story is in her memoir, Wounded Heart, Graceful Warrior. It's part of her story. She's a survivor. She went on to thrive. She went on to remarry, be a mom. How many children do you have now, Kellyanne?
4.
She went on to have more children without an abuser. Same thing with me. I moved on, but it took my healing, it took my maturity, it took my growth. And are there any last tips that you want to leave to moms who are dealing with DV cases, custody cases, or co parenting with their abuser?
I think the biggest thing I have to say is it's not your identity. It's not your identity. It's your struggle. Struggles can be overcome. Your identity is still your identity. You're a beautiful woman in a difficult place, and you're learning how to raise children and deal with difficult things in life, people who lie, cheat, abuse. But that's not your identity. You are a graceful warrior. You can rise up and fight against this graciously, patiently, with incredible wisdom. Just get the resources you need to build your confidence. Even though they've stolen it from you, maybe they've tried to steal your identity by talking bad about you. It's a lie. That's not who you are. You truly are a wounded heart and a graceful warrior.
Thank you, Kellyanne. I love what you have to say. Moms who have shattered self-esteem, the thing is, we have to rebuild that self-esteem with esteemable acts. And the thing about self-esteem, it's our, fundamental power. And we sometimes have low self-esteem getting into relationships with these abusers. But really, the word self-esteem has the word self. It means we have to do it for ourselves, give it to ourselves. The narcissist is never going to call us a great mother. They're going to put us down, criticize, condemn us. We have to believe in ourselves as mothers, find those support systems, rebuild our sense of self-worth and self-esteem, and not listen to a narcissist or an abuser who just lies and abuses. So thank you so much for listening. Just know, if you are in this situation, there are many of us survivors out there. You're not alone. You can come over to my website and get my books and blog. And I now co parent with my former abuser, and I have peace. And how is that possible? Well, through me, it was a miracle, which was a shift in perception. For Kelly Ann, she got her miracle from, a spiritual source and from God. But however you get better conditions for yourself and your child, we encourage you to grab onto those resources and tools. And thank you so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe if you're in this YouTube channel, or subscribe to the podcast. There's a free podcast on my Substack free email newsletter for moms, and there is a free Spotify podcast. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, you can learn, heal, and outgrow the narcissist.